All right, now joining the show for I believe his third appearance, we have friend of the program and Bryant University long snapper David McCain. Dave, what's going on, man?
Oh man, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Happy to get you back on, especially for the topic we got today. Kicking around some ideas. Dave came up with doing a Madden draft, especially in the wake of John Madden passing away. And I was thrilled about it. Like I mentioned to him before, I do some homework about it. So it's definitely a draft I'm looking forward to doing. But before we get into it, how's the off season been treating you so far?
It's been pretty good. Being the first full season in quite some time, and then also being totally in person for class was a lot. So
Yeah,
it's nice to kind of have a little. Plus, we had 7 away games this year,
it's
most of
brutal.
which were overnights. So it's nice kind of being able to just relax.
No, you guys got to go out to what, Central Michigan this year?
So we were supposed to play them last fall, and then that got canceled. So we went out to Akron.
Okay, because I saw some of the guys posting that you guys went out to the Hall of Fame, which I think is pretty sick on
Yeah, yeah.
for an away game. That's awesome.
Yeah, we flew into Cleveland and then went to Can like we went a day early and then went to Canton and then came back and then played at Akron, which was cool.
That's great. Now, did you travel for all the games and see playing time in those away games?
Yeah, yeah, I was the full-time starter for Longsnapper.
That's awesome. So were you just doing punts and field goals both?
So yeah, punts and field goals both.
Nice.
There was like a possibility of me just doing punts and then it ultimately just came down to me doing both.
Nice. So to go with this Madden draft, as a long snapper, when you see that hasn't been incorporated as a position yet, and they're just like 27 overall tight ends, what is like the thought process? Come, especially like talking to a long snapper. I want to hear what goes through your head when you see a guy like a Luke Rhodes, who's the best long snapper in the league, be a like a 40 overall, if that.
So I think it's funny because I'm like really big into self-deprecating humor.
Mhm.
Like like whenever I like joke around, it's usually like roasting myself. So
Yeah.
for that sake, I think it's hilarious.
Mhm.
But like realistically, it should be a roster spot in the game. Like
Yeah.
it's in like they get voted. There's an all-pro long snapper that's voted.
Right.
There's long snappers for the Pro Bowl. Plus, like some of those dudes are athletes. Like Luke Rhodes, people forget is like I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he like holds the career tackles record at Willie Mary, which is a D1 program. He played
Yeah.
linebacker there. Like Christian Kuntz, the Steelers linebacker, he played linebacker at Duquesne. I'm pretty sure he was like NEC Defensive Player of the Year. Like a lot of them are athletes, and it's funny. I tried it once. I hopped on like with the Colts in franchise mode, and I was like, I wonder what overall Luke Rhodes would be at like linebacker, and he bumped up to like a 60 or a 70 overall.
Yeah. It's because a lot of those guys, like you said, aren't, especially if they're coming from one double A programs, they're not just long snappers. Usually, some of them are used as like outside linebackers, inside linebackers, or even tight ends, and they're just gifted enough that they can long snap, make to the NFL. So it is pretty crazy. But this year, it looks like Atlanta, Josh Harris made it for the Pro Bowl. I'm trying to find the AFC who made it for.
I want to say it was Luke Rhodes.
Was I wouldn't be surprised if it was him because he's been great. Yeah, it is. He made the Pro Bowl, so that probably the best long snapper in the league right now would be him. And he does. I saw him. We were out in Arizona for the Colts Cardinals game on Christmas, and he's out there warming up, and it's cool to see him wearing gloves, especially they're like special long snapping gloves.
Yeah,
No
yeah,
other that seems like a position you'd want to be barehanded, but you see a guy like that who's the best in the game, kind of switching up the style and bringing that,
yeah.
incorporating that.
It's kind of interesting too because I saw he was doing it, so I figured like I'd try it out. Like
Mhm.
obviously not like the game or anything, just like just like doing some extra snapping practice, and I just like it's like too much grip. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it kind of gave me an understanding as to why quarterbacks don't wear gloves besides like
Mhm.
Teddy B. Like
Right. Right.
it's like I feel like if I wore like gloves like that, like snapping, I'd literally just airmail every snap because it's like stuck to your hands as you're like following through.
Yeah, you got to push so much off it. It's definitely weird. You'd be all over the place. So I think
Yeah,
that's you have to be a special breed to be able to wear those gloves, or just have a weird feel for the ball to wear those. But
yeah.
so you came up with the idea to do the Madden draft. I was thinking we do three. We go back and forth, do three picks each. Can't repeat the Madden game, and you kind of just give a little bit why you picked it. As guest of the show, you'll kick us off. We'll just go back and forth, but the ball's in your court with the number 1 overall pick in the Madden draft.
Number 1 overall pick, I got to go Madden 10.
Okay.
So it wasn't the first Madden I had played, but it was the first Madden where I kind of fell in love with like football and just like sports stats in general. Like Madden 10, and then another one that might be a future pick, so I won't say it. But those 2 games like kind of like made me fall in love with statistics where like I knew the height and weight of every single NFL player just like off the top of my head just from grinding out franchise mode and stuff. And then Madden 10, like the cover with Larry Fitz and Troy Polamalu, like I think that's the best Madden cover of all time. Like,
yeah, I forgot that came up last time that that's how you got into like, because you're a super in-depth type of math major. I don't remember the actual major that you said last time, but you said that's how you kind of got into it, was through Madden, just memorizing all the stats and height and weight of guys, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah. Plus that game, that's what made me fall in love with the Steelers. And I'm like a diehard Steelers fan. Like I will be for the rest of my life because like right when I started playing that game, like Madden 9 was my first one that I really played, but Madden 10 was when like Steelers were like the best defense in the league and it wasn't even close. Like, so
Jake Harrison, Brett Kiesel, Lawrence Timmons, Polamalu, just a sick team.
Yeah, like literally any of them could be Pro Bowlers in that 11.
That's a good pick. My number 1 pick, I'm gonna take Madden 12. This wasn't the first one I ever played. It's the first one I ever owned. I had it for the Wii actually. And like one of my biggest memories of playing this was Tremont Williams was a free agent, one of the corners, and I'd throw him at punt returner, and he was just dirty at returning punts. So like that's like the first memory I have of like dominating people in Madden. Just like you'd have like a sick punt return. I mean, you're playing against the computer, but half the time. But that was like my first fond memory of it, and it also has what I think is the best Madden soundtrack of all time. It's got 6 foot, 7 foot. You've got Award Tour by Tribe Called Quest. Snoop Dogg's on it. The Foo Fighters are on it. Group Love is on it. Like it's just an outstanding soundtrack, and has one of the best stories behind a Madden cover. And it's the reason that people are no longer allowed to vote is because fullback Peyton Hillis was the cover. So overall,
I'm pissed because that was gonna be my second pick.
yeah, overall, there's just so much good stuff. Like I think about that game. Just so much history behind it.
Like I hear any of those songs, and I like any of those songs from that track at your playlist. I immediately think of like that cover with the splatter background for like the dashboard and everything.
Oh, it's awesome! It like nothing beats that. It's great.
Plus, another cool thing with that one was I could be wrong, but I think it might have been the only year where if you like go to like the Play Now exhibition, and if you clicked like the left trigger for like random, like if you're playing like Xbox or PlayStation, if you click the left trigger 3 times for like 3 randoms or something like that, or if you hit a certain amount of times and a team would come up and it was the software developers for Madden, and they were all in the game, like all with their like own pictures, like they're just normal dudes with like obviously fake height and weights in there, and they're all 99 across the board for every attribute. And it was like I think they're like EA is located in like somewhere in Florida. So it was like that city and they're like the Sharks or something like that. And it was like you had all their pictures, like some of them would be wearing like costumes in the pictures. Another one I remember the dude was literally just turned around, so it was the back of his head. Like
I did not know. That's like I wish they threw in more wrinkles like that.
Yeah.
Like the old ones from like 08 to like 15, they threw in so many different wrinkles that it just made for you didn't know what the game was going to be every year. Like so much different stuff. So I do miss it because now it's like the 2K thing where it feels very repetitive year after year.
Yeah.
So I'm taking Madden 12. You've taken Madden 10. You've got the next pick. I'm curious where you're going to go with this one.
So this one's tough. I'm going to have to go with Madden 09.
Madden 09,
just because there's a couple. So the game itself was like, all right. but there are things within the game that I thought were like super cool that you just don't really see with like the current game. So there was like no ultimate team or anything, which I was like a huge ultimate team guy. Like I love those game modes. Like 2K My Team, I play like crazy. Diamond Dynasty and MLB The Show, I play like crazy. So Madden, I didn't have any of that, but I was like 8, 9 years old when it came out. So like none of that even mattered because I was just not smart enough to understand that yet. But there was certain stuff in it. The franchise mode, it was almost like a my player type thing. And in it, I remember as a prospect, you'd like do stuff like you do the draft drills and whatnot, and then they had a Wonderlic test you could do.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I thought that was sweet. I don't know why they took that out because that's such like a cool thing. Like it's such a niche NFL thing.
Yeah, because
And then
it's no other league does that. Like literally, no other
yeah,
professional sports league does that. Like keep that in.
yeah. Like I was so sick that they had that. And then uh I used to like play against my dad. Like we would just like play in our living room and whatnot. And like he barely knew how to play, but I sucked. It was my first Madden. I was in elementary school still. And I remember we were both huge Dallas Clark fans. So
Yeah, Colts
we'd
tight
both
end.
just play as the Colts and just either throw like Y stick to Dallas Clark or run a halfback dive to Joseph Adai because Joseph Adai was like cracked in that game for no good reason. And then they had a feature in it. It might have been the last year they had that feature. They could have had Madden 10, but I only remember using it in Madden 9, where it was the Madden Rewind, where you got like a certain amount of rewinds per game where if something happened and you want to like, it was like a mulligan. So you
Yeah,
just hit X and everything goes in reverse and goes back to where it was. So like if my dad would like bust like a big touchdown on me, I'd hit that and be like,
throw
what's
the
happening?
mulligan right at
I'm like, I have no idea.
it. That's odd. Like I especially like, I think like the Wonderlic test is something they definitely could have brought back in the past 2 or 3 years because they added in that face of the franchise
Mhm.
where you go like you commit as a high schooler, which I think is a cool thing. You play in
Yeah.
college and then why like you do a couple drills at the combine, but just go all the way with it. Make it give us the whole combine experience
Yeah.
would be
It's just
the
so
best
cool.
thing. So my next pick, I'm going with what would be Madden 14 technically, but it's Madden 25, the 25th anniversary edition. Um, because it's got the multiple covers. You got the Barry Sanders cover, which I had, and then there's the Adrian Peterson cover. You also had, which I think was a really cool feature, was like 2 Hall of Fame teams that you could play as. You
Hmm.
had like the Canton greats versus like the all-time greats or something. And the rosters were just like when you're at that age and you see, you know, all the greats of all time and you see like, oh my God, I have Joe Montana as my starting quarterback, but I also have Mike Vick and Terry Bradshaw on the bench. And my backup running backs behind Walter Payton are Barry Sanders and Jim Brown. You're like, it's like sensory overload.
Yeah,
You like
literally.
freak out because you don't know who you want to start. And like you constantly going through at least how I was, I'd go through the depth chart and every quarter would tinker around and move guys in. But
Mhm.
it was ridiculous. And also, I became a Vikings fan because of Adrian Peterson, and playing as him in Madden this year, he was just so ridiculous. It was after one of his best seasons of all, I think his MVP season, he was just cracked out of his mind. So he was an unstoppable force. So I would always use him too. And you'd play against friends. They're like, well, you can't keep using him. Well, it's like, oh no, I'm a Vikings fan. You just use that as your excuse. So that's part of it too. So and then again, another pretty solid soundtrack. You had Ozzy Osbourne on it, the Black Eyed Peas, Bush, Styx, Guns N' Roses, White Stripes. Like it was a really, I think, probably the most diverse soundtrack that a Madden's really ever had.
Plus,
Um,
that was a fun one too because I want to say that was the first year they incorporated their new physics engine,
mhm,
but they didn't really tinker with the stamina effects at all. So
mhm.
like I played a bunch of Ultimate Team, and as a Steelers fan, I had to have Jerome Bettis as my running back because
Yep.
they finally put him in the game. Uh, and I remember I would have him, and then I have a Brandon Jacobs card as the backup,
Oh my God.
and I would literally just flick the right stick forward and they would just flatten people and not lose speed
Mhm.
or any stamina, just keep going. And it was the cheesiest thing ever, but I loved it.
Yeah, no running back like that. Bettis was. insane. Like the three probably most unstoppable would be that Bettis, Eric Dickerson in recent years. I think it was
Yup.
in like 19 or 20 on Ultimate Team, and then Derrick Henry now. Those have got to be the three most dominant backs.
Yeah.
Just because like they were impossible to tackle. AP was really good, but if you looked at any three of those in Madden, it would just be it's game over. Like if you
Yeah, it's like
face off,
Dickerson, Bo Jackson. They both had like
yeah,
99 speed, probably, even with their low cards. I remember Madden 12, that was the first year I played Ultimate Team. I had an Eric Dickerson card, and I would literally just run jet sweeps with him online. And my like 10-year-old self was like beating up on these like middle-aged men who are actually like running like schemes, like, oh, he's running cover two, run the post. And I'm just running jet sweep with Eric Dickerson every play.
That's the best when you play somebody that's so into it. Like they're trying to actually like read coverages very seriously, and you're just running the same stuff over and over, just running yours like the normal plays you run against the computer in like my franchise or something. You're in exhibitions and you're just smoking dudes. It's the greatest feeling.
Yeah, it's so funny.
All right, now your final pick. What are we going with?
So I'm gonna have to go with. It's tough because I want to pick the first Madden where they had like the storyline, like the new like 2K type storyline with the face of the franchise. But I got to go with Madden 13 just because I think that's the Madden that I clocked the most amount of hours in.
Okay.
Like I played franchise mode like crazy. I'd like create players, throw them in there. That was the first year where they had the Canton Greats in there. They didn't have like the NFL lights. They didn't have two teams. They just had the one. They just had the Canton Greats. And like you said, it was sensory overload. Like it would like make me feel like I was like envisioning, like you see like the NFL films and it's like the old like orchestra music playing. It's like Jim Brown rumbling down the field. Like I felt like I was living that through like Madden.
Oh my God.
It was just the best. And then
that, and like another cool feature about that game is you got to actually play at the Hall of Fame stadium too.
Yeah.
Which was like I went out to the Hall of Fame for like my 10th birthday. You were there recently. Like that field is legit. It's an unreal stadium. It's like a coliseum. So to be able to play there with like the greatest players of all time on Madden is just awesome.
When we were in Canton, our our punter and our holder, they snuck in to like the field while we were all still going through the tour or whatever.
Yeah.
They like recorded a TikTok and like tagged Juju in it. We're like, where are they? And I see like I like go on my TikTok feed. I'm like in the bathroom and I just see like them like doing like the Corvette thing like on the field. I was like, how'd they get there?
That's actually awesome. That is great.
The Madden 13 Ultimate Team was sick. I like played that like a religious amount. I got a team to like all 99 overalls. And I remember that year you could run duplicate players. And so like the cheesy thing to do, and of course I did it because you have to. My whole offensive line was all Gene Upshaw.
And he's so dominant too. He just throwing dudes around.
So you just see like all the neck rolls across the whole line. And then I would run like Mike Vick, of course. That year in Ultimate Team, you remember the Deion Sanders combine commercials with Leon Sandcastle?
Yeah, Leon Sandcastle.
So they had like a quarterback, a wide receiver, a DB, Leon Sandcastle card with like 99 everything. It was just a great game. Super cheesy. I remember I got like me and my buddy Tanner would always play. We would just like play head to head. And then he didn't play Madden for like a couple years because I pissed him off so bad just running QB draw with Mike Vick.
That's got to be like a top 10 rage quit. Like that's just a dominant moment in Madden. Because you force somebody to retire from the game for a few years.
Yeah, it was just funny. The only downside was that was the year where they did no soundtrack. They only did. It was kind of cool, but it got old because you like actual music. They had like the NFL films like soundtracks in the background.
Yeah.
Plus the intro thing. That was the only sports video game I've ever played where like most of the time I'd sit through the intro where you could click A, get through it. It was Ray Lewis like in a locker room, all the lights off, but a spotlight on him. He's like, I've always been told I'm too small, not big enough, not fast enough. And I would watch it. And I'm sitting there like in my living room, like getting hype.
You got goosebumps on your arms.
Yeah. But yeah, Madden 13, a lot of nostalgia there.
So you went nostalgia. I'm gonna go fairly recent. I'm gonna go Madden 21. because I'm a fan of one of the game modes in it, Madden, the backyard mode. It
Yeah.
is a really, really cool mode, I think, because you I like the whole idea of you win and you get a new player. You pretty much take a player from that team, and you also get like this. You can pick like this, have Snoop Dogg as your head coach. You can get Quavo as a head coach. I like that, and especially there's so much going on and the games are so short. It also makes you want to keep coming back for more and more because there's like the colors are flashing and like I
Mhm.
think the length is perfect where you're not able to set quarter lengths, and being able to play against somebody online where it's moving that fast is you're on the edge of your seat the whole time. I
Yeah.
also one of the big things I like this is probably my favorite year of pass rush moves where you're using just the joystick to flick either bull rush, club, inside swim, um, which is pretty cool. And then I wasn't ultimate team for me felt familiar. This in Madden 21 like pretty normal, nothing
Mhm.
really that stands out. But I think that's what sets it over is the Madden backyard. And then a
Yeah.
decent soundtrack. I like how they let Lamar pick the soundtrack, which is I think every year they should have whoever's going to be on the cover of Madden pick the soundtrack. Like I would have loved to have heard like a Brett Favre year where the year in
Yeah.
'09 if he had picked the soundtrack, or if Calvin Johnson picked it in 13. Like that would have been pretty great. So I got to go with 21, even though it's fairly recent. But yeah,
Yeah, I like the backyard mode is sick because it's like draft champs. That's the name of the
yes,
game. Yeah, it's like that, but on a whole nother level. And
hmm
I do love when they get to like pick the soundtrack. Like this isn't a Madden, but like NBA 2K13, they had Jay-Z pick the soundtrack.
yeah,
And
that's
like
awesome. That
that's like the most like memorable sports game soundtrack to me. Like I hear any of those songs, it's just good memories right away.
yeah. What was one of the 2Ks you lost? It was the oh god, was it 14 maybe? You logged in. It was Hate Me Now by Nas would start playing. And like that was the most memorable thing because all you would hear is basketball season has returned, and it like fades out, and then the big beat drop happens, and it's just awesome when you're in the loading screen. You get so excited.
Yeah.
So
That was like me, like whenever like Now or Never by Kendrick and Mary J. Blige would come on in 2K13.
that's
I'm running with like a card like I hacked my player in that game to be a 99 everything. So I'm like, and that was when you could hit like corner threes off of because it triggers like a Euro step. So like I'd hear that song playing. I'm cheesing 3 pointers, like there's nothing better.
it was also the worst when you would play against friends on like blacktop or something,
Oh my
and you would
god, yeah.
lose, and like a song like that would come on because you're just sitting there like waiting for because you're like, all right, let's run it back, run it back, run it back. All you want
Yeah.
to do is play them again, and you're just sitting there waiting for it to load back to where you can pick your teams, and you're just sitting with your controller in your lap, just like listening to that.
Yeah, just white knuckling your controller.
Oh yeah. So I didn't realize you're a Steelers fan, and a lot's been going on with Pittsburgh recently. Big Ben is going to be done. He is done pretty much.
Yeah.
So what's your thoughts with um, how he's going out? If you wish maybe he went out earlier, and who you want to replace him?
So I would have wished he'd went out earlier if we had a better person to fill in. So like realistically, because his body is so freaking beat up.
He
Like you
you
see like the
see when
pictures
he
from
tries
like
to
six,
run.
yeah, like you see pictures from like 6 years ago where he's got ice on every joint and ligament in his body, and then thinking now, like, and I've heard like people like players in the Steelers coming out and saying he's been playing with like messed up hip flexors, this, that, and the third. But I like the way it's going out. I really loved the last game at Heinz because one, our defensive line, like TJ Watt was a sack away from tying Michael Strahan's record and only like 13 full games played, which I think is unreal. Like
I think he's gonna get the record this week.
yeah, yeah. And he's been playing with like cracked ribs, messed up groin. Like he's just a dog. And then because there's so much pressure on him, like it's different. It'd be different if we were playing like a bad offensive line, but that Cleveland O line for any like O line fanatics out there, they probably have the best interior trio in the NFL.
Yeah, well, it's
Like,
Treader, Batonio, and Wyatt Teller.
yeah, like that is like it doesn't get really any better
That's
than
three
that.
guys that you could all make the argument, all three of them being all pro players. Like there's an argument to be made for all three. And then even when Jack Conklin's healthy, that's a fourth guy you can make the argument for an all pro.
And when you have a guy that's so dominant as an outside B who goes into pass coverage, call it 15-20% of the time, that he forces so much attention to himself that he frees up his other players to get 5 extra sacks on top of his 4. Like him and Highsmith and then combined with the interior D line, they're giving me flashbacks. It looked like Woodley and Harrison out there with Brett Kiesel inside. It just made me so happy to watch. And then I felt like it was like a passing of the torch moment, whereas like Big Ben he didn't play bad, but like he didn't play like great. But Najee Harris was just going off. And there was one player I wanted in the draft last year, and it was Najee Harris. And seeing him go for 188 yards and a touchdown, it was like a passing of the torch from Ben to him. Like, this is your team now kind of thing.
He's been sick this year. And that defensive line this year would have been a nice one to have Bud Dupree also, if he a healthy Bud Dupree, if he stuck around, because that would have been the best pass rushing duo in the whole league. And like last year, I made the argument for that Watt shouldn't have won Defensive Player of the Year. I still believe that with what Donald went against, but this year I think if you make the argument against him not getting Defensive Player of the Year, or if you make the argument against him getting it, you're completely wrong. He, like you said, 14 or 13 games. He's going to break the NFL sack record, and he's got the sack total by 5 or 6 probably. Like he's the clear-cut Defensive Player of the Year,
and I love that he's going to break it, and it's not getting like we have the 17-game season. So many records are going to be broken. Like Derrick Henry would have demolished the rushing record if he was still playing.
He'll do it next year, or Jonathan Taylor will do it next year. One of those two guys will do it, and I think Cooper Kupp will break another receiving record maybe next year, or you'll see somebody else like a Devontae Adams or a Justin Jefferson.
Yeah. Like I saw like Cooper Kupp even said is like, it feels like illegitimate that I'm breaking these records because it's more games. He said something along the lines of that, but I love that like TJ Watt's likely going to break this record, and it's not going to be like in a cheesy way. Like it's going to be in possibly less games than the other like top 5 single season sack record guys.
Yeah. And let's not forget that Strahan was pretty much given the sack record back when Favre pretty much took a dive for Strahan to get that sack. So I think so. Who do the Steelers have the last week?
Baltimore, I believe.
I mean, if he's going against Villanueva, it's going to be a tough day for that Baltimore offense.
Yeah.
And they don't have Orlando Brown anymore, and I think Stanley's out for the year. So it's pretty much, I think at this point, his record to lose.
Yeah, and he's such a dog. Like I just love the energy he brings, because he's not like. There's a difference between like guys being tools and guys knowing they're better than everyone they're against, and he's the latter.
Yes. So who do you want as the Big Ben replacement? Is it somebody in free agency? Is it a trade, or is it a guy in this year's draft?
So it's not necessarily a very strong QB class for the draft. It hasn't really been like super strong in the last couple of years, if we'll be real.
Weird that going into this college season, I thought this was going to be like the strongest, like one of the strongest draft classes ever. And now you're left with Corral, Pickett, and like maybe Malik Willis, maybe Carson Strong, maybe Howell. There's really just 2 guys that you can make the argument for first rounders. It's disappointing how weak it is.
Yeah. So I really don't want to draft a guy. We have Dwayne Haskins on our team who's like, he's talented, but I don't think he's the guy. And then I don't want Rudolph. Like, he's a Steeler, but like, I just don't feel comfortable with him starting. Dobbs is literally an engineer for NASA. Like, this is his side gig. And then, so I want Aaron Rodgers. Like, this will spark a whole nother debate, but I think Aaron Rodgers is by far the best quarterback of all time.
Okay.
Like, so I want him. Like, and like, I think it's pretty crazy that I say that, because like he won a Super Bowl against us. Yeah. But I think he's the best quarterback of all time, in my opinion. So I want him. And then that'd be cool, because he kind of said that like him and Devontae would likely be a package deal with whatever happens. So like, I think that's kind of unrealistic when it comes down to it. because it's not like the NBA where that like players can manipulate that hard.
Yeah, the NBA
But
is just on a whole nother level when it comes to that. It's like if
honestly,
you're
the
a star
players run
player
it.
that's like, I want this guy that I played with in college or high school, or that I played good with on like the USA team to come play here, that deal is done in usually 5 days or less. The
Yeah, it's
NFL is like, yeah, you can just like not play. We'll simply find someone else to
yeah.
replace you.
Yeah, I mean, you saw what happened with like Le'Veon Bell. He went from being the like arguably the best running back, like multi-purpose running back in the league, to being kind of a fringe guy.
Yeah.
So I want Aaron Rodgers. If that like assuming we get him, which likely won't happen, it's the way things go, and if we get him and end up with Devontae Adams, I think I'd cry because that team with Najee Harris, like we need a couple more O-linemen, so hopefully we'd have cap space left for that. But like even so, like with our O-line, I think we'd be able to hang just fine. Assuming a more realistic outcome happens, I think maybe a guy like Jimmy G, because I think Trey Lance is taking over in San
Yeah.
Francisco. Deshaun Watson would be sick. I
Mm-hmm.
think because a lot of like it's hard to tell if teams want him or not. We won't really see until we're in the true offseason, I think,
Yep.
because he is such a stud football player. Like obviously he has his like personal issues outside of football, but I feel like he'd be a really good fit with Tomlin and like the RPO type offense that our new OC has been putting in. So I think that'd be sick. I really just want or Russell Wilson because I think he's leaving
I think
Seattle.
him and Rodgers are both not going to be in the uniforms they're playing in now.
Yeah.
And there's going to be a lot of people after them, which is going to definitely be interesting. I think the best fit would be a guy like Watson because he's younger than both Rodgers and Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a pretty good receiving core. It's a young receiving core in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
and I mean if Watson does come back next year and is able to play all 17 games, I think he's going to be a real dark horse MVP candidate that's going to just start lighting the league on fire because he's been an MVP candidate when he's been in like when he plays with a very bad Texans team. So
Yeah, like when they played the Chiefs in the playoffs a couple years ago and they're up like 28-0. Like he was torching them.
oh yeah, it's ridiculous. And then they pretty much took everything away from him. Traded D Hop, got rid of Randall Cobb, got rid of I think Philip Lindsay, brought in Mark Ingram, got rid of Mark Ingram. They never had a tight end. Like they literally gave him nothing to work with, and he was still putting up good numbers.
Yeah, like with Juju, Claypool, Deontay, and then Freiermuth. Oh, I love Pat Freiermuth.
He's awesome.
He is Heath Miller 2.0. I love it.
Yes. Yeah, he'll play 15 seasons with the Steelers and then hang it up. Like it's just gonna be. I don't. He's a guy that seems just fit for Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. And like the fans love him. Like if you watch a Steelers game, every time he gets a catch, it's instead of Heath, it's Muth. I
That's
think
awesome.
I love it. It's just a culture thing. Like so good. But yeah, like ideally a young mobile guy if it's not Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson. Because those are both probably unrealistic because other teams are going to want them and we have to allocate our money into other spots like the offensive line. So I think realistically the most sound way to better our offense would be beef up the O-line and try to get a guy like Deshaun Watson.
Mm-hmm. Now, before I let you go, you're seeing your former star receiver Antonio Brown kind of lose his mind. What's your take on what's going on with him right now? Because I feel like it's very 50-50 split where some people do feel bad for him, and other people don't. I mean, I don't personally feel bad for Antonio Brown as a guy. I think I think he just needs to step away from football personally, but I don't know what your stance on this is.
So I've been saying this before. It was like a pretty popular like assumption, but I remember that game against the Bengals. That was like a gritty couple years every time we played the Bengals with Shazier pretty much getting
With two teams
paralyzed.
that hated each other. Like it wasn't like a made up rivalry. It was a bitter
Yeah.
rivalry.
Because I love how people like Steelers Ravens is a rivalry. Steelers Browns and Steelers. Like I don't think there's any grittier division than the AFC North in terms of playing each other. Like NFC East, people say is always like head to head, but head to head statistically, you watch a game and don't even look at the stats or points on the board. I think the dirtiest games are the AFC North games.
Definitely.
So
Well,
I
especially
think,
you go back to Steelers Browns when Garrett hit Rudolph with the helmet. Like
oh my
that,
God, yeah.
it's It's the
Like
hood of the NFL, pretty much.
yeah,
It's the
literally, like
trenches.
the biggest instances of like crazy shit that's happened has been between the teams that aren't supposedly rivals in that division, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, so going off of that, I think that hit that Vontez Burfict put on where he just clipped him head to head on the slant, I think that kind of gave him, like, he obviously got concussed from that, like,
Yeah.
no doubt. And I think he's dealing with some like CTE, like post brain trauma issues from that. And I think he just kind of needs to find some help. I think it's kind of messed with him because he was never that type of personality before that all happened.
Yeah, he was more of a he was kind of like an on-field, like he was like Odell a little bit, or like Claypool, where it was the flashy celebrations when he'd score, but it was nothing to the severity where he was throwing stuff on the sideline or taking his jersey off on the sideline and leaving the game. Like it was never that point, and it's progressed so much since that hit. I agree with you there that that hit kind of it had to have flipped a switch somewhere in his mind that
Yeah,
just has altered him, and he'll never be the same. I mean, he's clearly the same player. He is still a
he's a
legit
stud.
receiver
Yeah,
and could be a number one for just about any team in the league, but he's not the same person.
yeah. Like he went from being, like you said, like an OBJ, like he had some swag to him. He didn't
Mhm.
have like a bad attitude. He had
Yeah.
some swagger to him, like a lot of like good receiver, like skill position guys have. And it went from that to just him like kind of going off the rails. But I remember there talks where he was like said it was something involving Tomlin and Roethlisberger, and then people were like, "Oh, the Steelers front office is like in shambles now." And then he went to the Raiders and was gone in like a blink of an eyes.
And it
And
was
then people
30
were
less
like,
than 30 days because he couldn't wear the helmet he wanted.
"Yeah." So I think it's kind of good that he's bounced around because it's kind of prevented the jeopardization of like these other figures in the NFL that are otherwise not really problematic when you talk about stuff within the league.
Mhm.
Actually, I take that back because what happened with Gruden. But guys, up until that point, that never had any scenarios like that, I should say. Like
Yeah.
Tomlin, you never hear anything bad about him.
No.
And then all of a sudden AB starts, saying this, that, and the third, and it's like people start questioning him. It's guys like that who like almost had their reputations totally ruined when they didn't really do anything.
Right. Yeah. It's and also like a lot of the stuff he's done since the hit has definitely been, I think, a product maybe of the hit, but it doesn't take away. I don't think Antonio Brown's a good guy or really has been since he's gotten in the league because he had the sexual assault allegations from college. He had
Yeah,
the burglary charges were before the hit. Like there was a lot of stuff that occurred before the hit. Um, but I just think I think if him getting away from football is what needs to be done because if he
yeah,
wants to have I mean he's probably got enough money to never play again because he
oh
was the
yeah,
number one receiver in the league for a handful of years. He definitely got paid, but if he wants to have any type of life after football, now needs to be the time. He I think hangs it up and walks away just because, especially now, Tampa's not going to have you back. And Brady was a guy that vouched for him twice. Once to bring him to New England in the midst of all these sexual assault allegations coming out, and wants to bring him down to Tampa when Bruce Arians was like, "We don't want him," and then Brady pretty much strong armed that to bring him down there. So it's
yeah.
when the one guy now that has vouched for you twice really won't have a say, it's going to be difficult for him to land on another team.
Especially a guy like Brady, because he is realistically the only player in the NFL that probably has that type of pull that the NBA players have,
Yeah.
just because he's been around the block and then some. Like
Mhm.
whether or not people want to say he's the best quarterback of all time or not, he's the greatest when you talk about accolades. He's like he knows more about the game than pretty much anyone else.
Yeah.
And if not, he's in the top 1 percentile of those guys. So like people look at Brady like he knows what he's talking about. And
Mhm.
if that's the one guy that you kind of mess up with, then all hope's kind of lost if you're looking for other guys to kind of reel you back in.
Yeah. The only other guy I'd say would probably be that may have the pull to bring him wherever he goes next season would be Rodgers. And that's even at that, like a lot of people don't like Rodgers. So there's
Yeah.
that. Like people don't like Brady as a player. I think people don't like Rodgers more as a guy.
Yeah.
So
Did
that's
you see Did you see the MVP voting thing? The dude from Chicago who was like,
I
I didn't vote for Rodgers because he's a jerk.
I listened to it today, and it's like the biggest group of assholes are the people that vote for like MVP and for the Baseball Hall of Fame because
Oh my,
they
the
act like
baseball
they're
thing.
kingmakers. Like
Yeah,
one of them put on Twitter, they're like, "I'm keeping my ballot blank."
I
Because
saw that.
it's like,
Yeah,
wow, you're real brave. Like, thank you for that. Thank you for not voting for David Ortiz and Kurt Schilling to get into the Hall of Fame this year. We're
yeah.
really missing out on your 1%. Like I think that group of sports is the biggest group of losers just because majority haven't played. They've all just been beat writers their entire life. Like that's pretty much how
Hmm.
you get it is you have to just be a writer for X amount of time. And so this guy is just he calls Rodgers the biggest jerk because he wasn't vaccinated pretty much. And the way he handled it. Like and he even said he's like, "Yeah, oh yeah, he's probably the best player." Like there's no doubt in my mind he's the best player in the league. Like
Yeah.
that's what we're voting on. I mean,
It's not the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. This is the most valuable player
yes,
award.
it's ridiculous. Like, and he's like, yeah, he's better than Cooper Kupp. He's better than Brady. He's better than Jonathan Taylor. Well, it's like, oh, okay, those are the other three guys that are going to be in contention to win MVP this year. So if he's better than those three, um, just submit your ballot. So it'll probably
Yeah.
be. I could legitimately see it being like a 49-1 vote. I do
And
think
he's
it'll be a
probably
little
gonna
bit
be like,
closer, but
it's probably gonna be like a handful of guys who vote like Brady just because he's Brady, and then another couple that vote like Mahomes just because he didn't have a good year but still looks cool and he does no look passes, like
it,
stuff like that.
the ones that purposely vote because I think there's some guys that probably like legitimately believe Brady will win, like is the MVP. There's the argument to be made, and same with maybe Mahomes. But the people that there will be two or three guys that join this guy and intentionally do not vote for Rodgers. They'll be the loudest
Hmm.
that you see on Twitter, on the radio,
Yeah,
and on TV, and they'll get like a segment on ESPN where they'll talk about how they think Rodgers is the biggest jerk because he's not media friendly. Like the only media he does is the Pat McAfee show. Like that's pretty much
yeah.
all. Like that's it. So
And
to
it's
me,
almost like they're like virtue signaling for like an audience that doesn't care.
yes,
Like we just want to see like who the best football player is when it comes down to it. Like we're not gonna remember when like 20 years from now, we're not gonna be like, Rogers was like the best, but like he was kind of ambiguous and vague and talking about the vaccine, so you couldn't really tell what he meant.
yeah,
Like
like yeah, we're gonna be
no
like,
one's
oh
gonna
my god,
say that.
remember that year Rodgers won the MVP with literally one receiver. Like that's what
Yeah,
we're gonna look back on, not that maybe he was vaccinated or maybe he wasn't. That's not gonna be the thought in our mind. But yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. But
yeah.
hey,
Also,
oh, what's
I
up?
think another thing, how they do it
Yeah.
in college, I think they got to throw in an offensive line of the year.
Well, they have that in college.
I'm saying like
Oh,
they do in
oh
college. I want that for the NFL or
yeah.
like an O line MVP type scenario. Like,
Well, it definitely should be a thing because there's been a lot of years where, like, I think offensive linemen have been snubbed for awards, like Quentin Nelson for Rookie
yup.
of the Year, and same with this year. I think Creed Humphrey should win offensive Rookie of the Year just because he literally I think he is the best center in the NFL. Like, there's
Hmm.
no if ands or buts about it. He's just been super dominant throwing guys around. So yeah, there should be like I think it's the Joe Moore Award, but for the NFL.
Yeah.
Name it like the Anthony Munoz Award or
Hmm. Something like
the
that.
Gene Upshaw Award or the John Hanna, something like that, where you just look at sacks allowed, rushing yards, pressures allowed, stuff like that. You take all that into consideration. And I
Like,
like
imagine like the type of O line GOAT conversation Joe Thomas would be in if that was a thing for the last 25 years. Like,
it is crazy. And I think one of the big things this year with the Hall of Fame coming up, there's guys that I think get snubbed because they're offensive linemen. Like Willie Anderson has been on the ballot for so long. And in his career, I think he played 15 years, allowed 16 sacks with
yeah,
like
that's unreal.
terrible Bengals teams, and he's not in
Yeah.
the Hall of Fame. And same with Tony Baselli. He just didn't play as long, but he also allowed probably single digit sacks in his career. Like O-linemen just get snubbed. So I think
it's like when Sean Alexander had that crazy 2006 or 2007 season. Take Steve Hutchinson out of that equation. Tell me what happens.
Oh yeah, and
Like,
it's the one guy that's done it with kind of like a makeshift O-line was Derrick Henry, because like Luan was out a decent amount, Saffold was banged up, but that's still pretty good as your twos, or even guys that you sign off the street like a Dennis Kelly are able to lead the league in rushing. Like I think it's a whole that O-line really performed well.
That's why like Emmitt Smith like put like Barry, Walter, like any of those guys like in Emmitt Smith's scenario. Like people say like there's whole like Tom Brady's assistant quarterback type thing. Like you could say this if it wasn't such a casual thing to disregard offensive linemen, I feel like people would be like making arguments like that with like Emmitt Smith on the Cowboys, like saying he's a system running back. Like it's conversations that could come up that like might not necessarily be true, but I love just stirring the pot with that kind of stuff. You know what I mean?
Well, and that's the same with you want to talk like a guy that's technically a system running back is DeMarco Murray. He had Travis Frederick, Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, rookie Lale Collins, and I don't know who the other guard was, but they were all pretty much those first three guys I named were pretty much all in their prime.
It was like arguably the best O-line we've seen in our lifetime.
Yeah, I don't think it's close. The only one that you could compare is maybe in the next few years, this Browns O-line, if all get healthy, because Jedrick Willis is pretty good for a rookie tackle. And he's more of a finesse guy too. Like the rest of them are just power and they'll throw you around. So they're they could be the next best, especially with Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. You name it after one of the greats. And I like the way that the Joe Moore does it. They start with like 40 teams, I think, and they kind of just break it down into like just 4 semifinalists. And the Michigan O-line, they got dominated against Georgia, which was tough to watch, but
especially with like I love like the big boy swagger that some linemen have. He came out with like run the damn ball shirt or something like that. Like
that's tough to come out with, and then
like
it's not even them, because like that Georgia defense is just ridiculous. Their front seven when the
SEC is just different, bro. Like I'm telling you, like some of those teams like that, like Kentucky, they had a great season, but they weren't gonna win the SEC. Like if you took Levis in Kentucky, like if you took Will in Kentucky and put him in another conference, they're probably winning that conference.
They might be in the Big Ten championship. They'd win the Pac-12. I mean, that's
it's just crazy. Like Iowa was ranked number 2 at one point.
Yeah, and then they finished the season unranked.
Yeah.
They're another team. Their best player was their center. Was an offensive lineman.
Yeah, that kid was so fun to watch. Like you see the occasional play where they have him like skip, pull, stuff like that, because he was just quick.
Which is ridiculous. Having a center, the only center in the league that does that is Jason Kelsey. And like seeing centers skip pull is the most outrageous thing you'll probably ever witness.
Yeah. I love watching that stuff because so many people just don't understand it. Like I love just like watching like the different variations of pulls, the different schemes people run. Like I love like running like the buck sweeps, like everything like that. Like because it just gives you an appreciation for the game that like some people just don't understand, and I want them to like just look into it sometime.
There's so many moving parts, and it's 300-pound guys getting out on the perimeter, and they're crossing their feet to pull and getting up to a safety that's a lot faster and a lot more agile than them, and they're putting them on their butt. Like it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Dave, I appreciate you coming on, man. This draft was a blast, especially talking O-line too. I think this was awesome.
Yeah.
So we'll definitely, before the start of the season, definitely get you back on.
For sure.
Coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem. And thank you for listening to this episode of the My Parents Office podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes next week.